My life and mission. This lecture was delivered by Swami Vivekananda to the Shakespeare Club of Pasadena, California on 27th January 1900. It gives a vivid picture of how his great heart bled for the suffering millions of India, and also what was his plan for the uplift of his motherland to the position of her past glory. This was the only occasion when he talked before the public so poignantly about himself, his inner struggle and sorrow. Swami Vivekananda speaks. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the subject for this morning was to have been the Vedanta philosophy. That subject itself is interesting, but rather dry and very vast. Meanwhile, I have been asked by your president and some of the ladies and gentlemen here to tell them something about my work and what I have been doing. It may be interesting to some here, but not so much so to me. In fact, I do not quite know how to tell it to you, for this will have been the first time in my life that I have spoken on that subject. Now, to understand what I have been trying to do in my small way, I will take you in imagination to India. We have not time to go into all the details and all the ramifications of the subject, nor is it possible for you to understand all the complexity in a foreign race in this short time. Suffice it to say, I will at least try to give you a little picture of what India is like. It is like a gigantic building all tumbled down in ruins. At first sight, then there is little hope. It is a nation gone and ruined. But you wait and study, then you see something beyond that. The truth is that so long as the principle, the ideal of which the outer man is the expression, is not hurt or destroyed, the man lives. And there is hope for that man. If your coat is stolen 20 times, that is no reason why you should be destroyed. You can get a new coat. The coat is unessential. The fact that a rich man is robbed does not hurt the vitality of the man, does not mean death. The man will survive. Standing on this principle, we look in and we see what? India is no longer a political power, it is an enslaved race. Indians have no say, no voice in their own government. They are 300 millions of slaves, nothing more. The average income of a man in India is 2 shillings a month. The common state of the vast mass of the people is starvation, so that with the least decrease in income, millions die. A little famine means death. So there, too, when I look on that side of India, I see ruin, hopeless ruin. But we find that the Indian race never stood for wealth, although they acquired immense wealth, perhaps more than any other nation ever acquired. Yet, the nation did not stand for wealth. It was a powerful race for ages. Yet, we find that that nation never stood for power, never went out of the country to conquer, quite content within their own boundaries. They never fought anybody. The Indian nation never stood for imperial glory. Wealth and power then were not the ideals of the race. What then? Whether they were wrong or right, that is not the question we discuss. That nation, among all the children of men, has believed and believed intensely that this life is not real. The real is God, and they must cling unto that God through thick and thin. In the midst of their degradation, religion came first. The Hindu man drinks religiously, sleeps religiously, walks religiously, marries religiously, robs religiously. Did you ever see such a country? If you want to get up a gang of robbers, the leader will have to preach some sort of religion, then formulate some bogus metaphysics, and say that this method is the clearest and quickest way to get God. Then he finds a following, otherwise not. That shows that the vitality of the race, the mission of the race is religion. And because that has not been touched, therefore that race lives. See Rome. Rome's mission was imperial power, expansion. And as soon as that was touched, Rome fell to pieces, passed out. The mission of Greece was intellect. As soon as that was touched, why Greece passed out. So in modern times, Spain and all these modern countries, each nation has a mission for the world. So long as that mission is not hurt, that nation lives, despite every difficulty. But as soon as its mission is destroyed, the nation collapses. Now that vitality of India has not been touched yet. They have not given up that, and it is still strong in spite of all their superstitions. Hideous superstitions are there, most revolting some of them. Never mind. The national life current is still there, the mission of the race. The Indian nation never will be a powerful, conquering people. Never. They will never be a great political power. That is not their business. That is not the note India has to play in the great harmony of nations. But what has she to play? God and God alone. She clings unto that like grim death. Still there is hope there. So then, after your analysis, you come to the conclusion that all these things, all this poverty and misery are of no consequence. The man is living still and therefore there is hope. Well, you see religious activities going on all through the country. I do not recall a year that has not given birth to several new sects in India. The stronger the current, the more the hill pulls and a ditch. Sects are not signs of decay, they are a sign of life. Let sects multiply till the time comes when every one of us is a sect, each individual. We need not quarrel about that. Now, take your country. Here, the social laws, the political formation, everything is made to facilitate man's journey in this life. He may live very happily so long as he is on this earth. Look at your streets, how clean, your beautiful cities, and in how many ways a man can make money. How many channels to get enjoyment in this life. But if a man here should say, now look here, I shall sit down under this tree and meditate, I do not want to work. Why? He would have to go to jail. See, there would be no chance for him at all. None. A man can live in this society only if he falls in line. He has to join this race for the enjoyment of good in this life or he dies. Now let us go back to India. There, if a man says, I shall go and sit on the top of that mountain and look at the tip of my nose all the rest of my days, everybody says, go and Godspeed to you. He need not speak a word. Somebody brings him a little cloth and he is all right. But if a man says, behold, I am going to enjoy a little of this life, every door is closed to him. I say that the ideas of both countries are unjust. I see no reason why a man here should not sit down and look at the tip of his nose if he likes. Why should everybody here do just what the majority does? I see no reason. Nor why in India a man should not have the goods of this life and make money. But you see, how those vast millions are forced to accept the opposite point of view by tyranny. This is the tyranny of the sages. This is the tyranny of the great, tyranny of the spiritual, tyranny of the intellectual, tyranny of the wise. And the tyranny of the wise, mind you, is much more powerful than the tyranny of the ignorant. The wise, the intellectual, when they take to forcing their opinions upon others, know 100,000 ways to make bonds and barriers which it is not in the power of the ignorant to break. Now, I say that this thing has got to stop. There is no use in sacrificing millions and millions of people to produce one spiritual giant. If it is possible to make a society where this spiritual giant will be produced and all the rest of the people will be happy as well, that is good. But if the millions have to be ground down, that is unjust. Better that the one great man should suffer for the salvation of the world. In every nation, you will have to work through their methods. To every man, you will have to speak in his own language. Now, in England or in America, if you want to preach religion to them, you will have to work through political methods, make organizations, societies with voting, balloting, a president, and so on, because that is the language, the method of the Western race. On the other hand, if you want to speak of politics in India, you must speak through the language of religion. You will have to tell them something like this: the man who cleans his house every morning will acquire such and such an amount of merit. He will go to heaven or he comes to God. Unless you put it that way, they will not listen to you. It is a question of language. The thing done is the same, but with every race you will have to speak their language in order to reach their hearts, and that is quite just. We need not fret about that. In the order to which I belong, we are called sannyasins. The word means a man who has renounced. This is a very, very ancient order. Even Buddha, who was 560 years before Christ, belonged to that order. He was one of the reformers of his order. That was all. So ancient. You find it mentioned a way back in the Vedas, the oldest book in the world. In old India, there was a regulation that every man and woman, towards the end of their lives, must get out of social life altogether and think of nothing except God and their own salvation. This was to get ready for the great event, death. So, all people used to become sannyasins in those early days. Later on, young people began to give up the world, and young people are active. They could not sit down under a tree and think all the time of their own death. So, they went about preaching and starting sects and so on. Thus, Buddha, being young, started that great reform. Had he been an old man, he would have looked at the tip of his nose and died quietly. The order is not a church, and the people who join the order are not priests. There is an absolute difference between the priests and the sannyasins. In India, priesthood, like every other business in a social life, is a hereditary profession. A priest's son will become a priest just as a carpenter's son will be a carpenter or a blacksmith's son a blacksmith. The priest must always be married. The Hindu does not think a man is complete unless he has a wife. An unmarried man has no right to perform religious ceremonies. The sannyasins do not possess property and they do not marry. Beyond that, there is no organization. The only bond that is there is the bond between the teacher and the taught, and that is peculiar to India. The teacher is not a man who comes just to teach me, and I pay him so much, and there it ends. In India, it is really like an adoption. The teacher is more than my own father, and I am truly his child, his son in every respect. I owe him obedience and reverence first before my own father even, because they say the Father gave me this body, but he showed me the way to salvation. He is greater than Father. And we carry this love, this respect for our teacher all our lives. And that is the only organization that exists. I adopt my disciples. Sometimes the teacher will be a young man and the disciple a very old man. But never mind, he is the son, and he calls me father, and I have to address him as my son, my daughter, and so on. Now, I happened to get an old man to teach me, and he was very peculiar. He did not go much for intellectual scholarship, scarcely studied books, but when he was a boy, he was seized with a tremendous idea of getting truth direct. First, he tried by studying his own religion. Then he got the idea that he must get the truth of other religions, and with that idea, he joined all the sects one after another. For the time being, he did exactly what they told him to do, lived with the devotees of these different sects in return until interpenetrated with their particular ideal of that sect. After a few years, he would go to another sect. When he had gone through with all that, he came to the conclusion that they were all good. He had no criticism to offer to anyone. They are all so many paths leading to the same goal. And then he said, that is a glorious thing that there should be so many paths, because if there were only one path, perhaps it would suit only an individual man. The more the number of paths, the more the chance for everyone of us to know the truth. If I cannot be taught in one language, I will try another, and so on. Thus, his benediction was for every religion. Now, all the ideas that I preach are only an attempt to echo his ideas. Nothing is mine originally except the wicked ones. Everything I say which is false and wicked, but every word that I have ever uttered which is true and good is simply an attempt to echo his voice. Read his life by Professor Max Muller. Well, there at his feet I conceived these ideas. There with some other young men. I was just a boy. I went there when I was about 16. Some of the other boys were still younger, some a little older, about a dozen or more. And together we conceived that this ideal has to be spread, and not only spread but made practical. That is to say, we must show the spirituality of the Hindus, the mercifulness of the Buddhists, the activity of the Christians, the brotherhood of the Mohammedans by our practical lives. We shall start a universal religion now and here. We said, we will not wait. Our teacher was an old man who would never touch a coin with his hands. He took just the little food offered, just so many yards of cotton cloth, no more. He could never be induced to take any other gift. With all these marvelous ideas, he was strict, because that made him free. The monk in India is the friend of the prince today, dines with him, and tomorrow he is with the beggar, sleeps under a tree. He must come into contact with everyone, must always move about. As the saying is, the rolling stone gathers no moss. The last 14 years of my life, I have never been for 3 months at a time in any one place, continually rolling. So do we all.